Hello, everybody. My name is Delzar Slit, and today we're going to be checking into, well, every bias explained in 8 minutes. So, by the way, I have no idea what the fuck it's really about, but Jesus, there's a fuck ton of things here. Okay, yeah, now I've got my yawn in. This is by the Paint Explorer. I've never heard of this person before, but I guess we'll check him out. I explain stuff through paint. Subscribe and activate the bell if you like this video. I will if I do.
Bias blind spot. The
Mm-hmm.
tendency to think that oneself is less affected by cognitive biases compared to others.
Ah. I'm also going to be trying to think, do these apply to me throughout this video, I guess, then.
Gambler's fallacy. Gambler's fallacy happens when there's a tendency to think that future probabilities are altered by past events, when in reality they are unchanged.
Oh,
Omission
yeah.
bias. It's the tendency to judge harmful actions as worse or less moral than equally harmful inactions.
What? Oh.
Proportionality bias. Our innate tendency to assume that big events have big causes, which may also explain our tendency to accept conspiracy theories. Moral credential
Nah.
effect. It occurs when someone who does something good gives themselves permission to be less good in the future.
Uh... Wait a damn second. Hold up. I was reading this the wrong way. I took this as, bitch, I ain't got no house. I'm going to take your shit from your house. Instead of, bitch, I have money to give to people. So, that I've given money, I can take money. Fuck no. That's bullshit.
Self-serving bias. It's the tendency to claim more responsibility for successes than failures. Framing effect. The framing effect
Yeah, I
is
think
the
that would apply to
tendency to
everyone.
draw different conclusions from the same information, depending on how that
What? Hmm.
information is presented. This includes the contrast effect, which is the enhancement or reduction of a certain stimulus's perception when compared with a recently observed contrast.
Oh. Wait, that's a wombat? I thought those were. Or is there another? Okay, so I know that there's another type of rodent that's like on the ground and they're big as fuck. But wombats are also those? Oh, shit.
Object. Actor-observer bias. It's the tendency for explanations of other individuals' behaviors to overemphasize the influence of their personality and underemphasize the influence of their situation, and for explanations of one's own behaviors to do the opposite. Picture superiority effect.
Hmm?
The notion that concepts that are learned by viewing pictures are more easily and frequently recalled than are concepts that are learned by viewing their written word form counterparts.
Caution slippery when wet. Caution slippery when wet. What? I'm confused by this one. How would this affect you? You obviously didn't. That doesn't make sense.
Outcome
Oh,
bias. It's the tendency to judge a decision by its eventual outcome instead of the quality of the decision at the time it was made.
oh yeah, I'd done that one definitely. Local, if that is true, and pictures do make me learn better. I was about to say something, but then I realized that's technically true. Fuck. I did actually do some anime combos in real life on someone at one point. And I did learn them from an anime.
Mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect is a psychological phenomenon by which people tend to develop liking or disliking for things merely because they are familiar with them.
Oh
Hard,
yeah,
easy
most
effect.
definitely. I do
It's
that
the
one.
tendency to overestimate one's ability to accomplish hard tasks and underestimate one's ability to accomplish easy ones.
This is self snitching. Shut up. This, this doesn't apply to anyone. Shut up.
Survivorship bias. Survivorship bias happens when concentrating on the people or things that survived some process and in it.
Facebook had success thanks to likes. First off, Facebook is still alive, but at the same time, it shouldn't be.
Inadvertently overlooking those that did not because of their lack of visibility. Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. The Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also called frequency illusion, is the illusion where something that has recently come to one's attention suddenly seems to appear with very high frequency shortly afterwards. The
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely um have this one where I will say something immediately in like the next 4 days. I will see it 5 times over. It's like, oh, now that I'm paying attention, it's definitely hitting me.
reality is that before we placed our attention on that element, we just ignored it. Availability heuristics. The
Hmm?
availability heuristic is the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of events that easily come to mind. The availability of memories can be influenced by how recent they are or how unusual or emotionally charged they may be.
Yeah,
Dunning-Kruger effect. It's the tendency for unskilled individuals to overestimate their own ability and the tendency for experts to underestimate theirs. Halo effect.
yeah, that one
It's the
checks out.
tendency for a person's positive or negative traits to spill over from one personality area to another in others' perceptions
Greedy kindness sometimes spills into.
of them. Pygmalion effect. The phenomenon whereby others' expectations of a target person affect the target person's behavior in a
That's yeah, no, this one's legitimately true. I've had a whole ass moment where someone was like, "Why are you pissed off?" I'm like, "I'm just being quiet." It's like, "Yeah, no, you're," and I did actually get more annoyed by them for doing this. No, that one's genuinely true. Yeah.
self-fulfilling prophecy. Decoy effect. This
Hmm?
bias is widely used in marketing. It's the phenomenon whereby consumers will tend to have a specific change
$400, 300 photos, $300, 200 photos. The fuck? Oh no! Local. I'm not doing it by if they're true or not. I mean it by are they true to me? And do I notice that I've done these? This is like the old Psych2Go videos in which I will then just proceed to start self snitching. Yeah.
change in preference between two options when also presented with a third option that is asymmetrically dominated. An option is asymmetrically dominated when it is inferior in all respects to one option, but in comparison to the other option, it is inferior in some respects and superior in others. Selection bias. Selection bias is the bias introduced by the selection of individuals, groups, or data for analysis in such a way that proper randomization is not achieved, thereby
Mm-hmm.
failing to ensure that the sample obtained is representative of the population intended to be analyzed. Anchoring bias.
Mm.
The anchoring bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on one trait or piece of information when making decisions, usually
So here's my thing, right? If you just showed me the cars and then said, "Okay, this is how much it's gonna cost me," I'd go, "Okay, that doesn't seem that bad." Then you have to remember gas, insurance, damages down the line because there's always gonna be something that goes wrong with a car.
the first piece of information acquired on that subject. This is why first impressions are so important. They paint a picture of what the other person is, and that picture gets anchored, making it hard to change. This bias is often exploited during negotiations. When the
Mm-hmm.
seller gives a seemingly unreasonable high price, that price becomes the starting point for the negotiation, and the buyer inadequately adjusts from it.
Until you realize that my only way to haggle is just go, "I'm going to get it on the penny." It's like, excuse me, what? You can't get it for a penny. Pennies are literally worthless. Yes, but I don't care.
Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, focus on, and remember information in a way that confirms one's preconceptions. Overconfidence effect.
Mm-hmm,
The
mm-hmm.
overconfidence effect is the tendency to have excessive confidence in one's own answers to questions.
Yes.
For example, for certain types of questions, answers that people rate as 99% certain turn out to be wrong 40% of the time. Egocentric bias. Egocentric bias is the tendency to rely too heavily on one's own perspective or have a higher opinion of oneself than reality. Examples of this are the
Yeah.
false consensus effect, which is the tendency for people to overestimate the degree to which others agree with them, and the false uniqueness bias, which is the tendency of people to see their projects and themselves as more singular than they actually are. Information bias. Information bias is a cognitive bias to seek information when it does not affect action. Hindsight bias. The hindsight bias is sometimes called the I knew it all along effect, and it is the common tendency
Yes.
for people to perceive past events as having been more predictable than they actually were. Projection bias. It's the tendency to overestimate how much one's future selves will share.
Sorry, it's just the fucking thug, like just this thug life. Ugh, I can only picture. Yeah, by seeing this image, the person I'm picturing who has this tattoo is someone who, as you can see, is like pretty pale ass skin, maybe black to long blonde hair. Um, they're wearing a basically white T-shirt that has like some random ass shit on it, and at the same time, they either have a crop top jacket or a hoodie in possession on them at all times. And as for pants, uh, I'll give them blue jeans for now. If not blue jeans, it will be gray sweatpants. As for his shoes, it's either Crocs or regular ass tennis shoes.
One's current preferences, thoughts, and values, thus leading to suboptimal choices. Apophenia. Apophenia is the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. This bias is one of the ways a stereotype can lead people to expect certain groups and traits to fit together, and then to overestimate the frequency with which these correlations actually occur. Another type of apophenia is pareidolia, which happens, for example, when you
That's I told. Okay, yeah, I do. This one definitely. This one's like legitimately probably the strongest one I've
see
seen all
images of
day.
animals in the clouds. Serial position effect. The serial
Hmm?
position effect is the tendency of a person to recall the first and last items in a list better than the middle ones.
Ah.
Recency bias. The recency bias gives greater importance to the most recent event, such as an interviewer who can vividly remember just the last person he interviewed because they're the most recent conversation they had. It's related to the serial position effect. Authority bias. Authority bias is the tendency to
Hmm.
attribute greater accuracy to the opinion of an authority figure, no
I disagree with this entirely. Fuck authority figures.
matter what the opinion's content is. Unit bias. The standard suggested amount of consumption, like the food serving size, that's perceived to be appropriate. A person would
Hmm.
consume it all, even if it was too much for that particular person. Availability cascade. It's a self-reinforcing process in which a
Hmm.
collective belief gains more and more plausibility through its increasing repetition in public discourse. It can be summarized in the phrase, repeat something long enough and it will become true. It's related to the availability
Ah.
heuristic. Bandwagon effect. It's the tendency to do things because many other people do the same. This effect can
Nah.
happen
Fuck
for two
people.
reasons. Conformism, when someone wants to fit in with others, or lack of information, where the person thinks that the opinion of many people is probably more accurate than just his. Illusory truth effect. People are more likely to identify as true statements those they have previously heard, even if they cannot consciously remember having heard them. Next in line effect.
Yeah.
When taking turns speaking in a group using a predetermined order, like going clockwise around a room, people tend to have diminished recall for the words of the person who spoke immediately before them. In-group bias.
Hmm.
In-group bias is the tendency for people to give preferential treatment to others they perceive to be members of their own groups. It usually happens because we encounter and interact with people in our group much more frequently than with strangers. This makes people in our group seem unique, while people outside of our
Hmm.
group seem boring and conformist. The mere exposure effect also plays a role in this bias. Spotlight effect. It's the sensation that everybody is focused on us that comes from overestimating the extent to which other people notice our appearance or behavior. Choice supportive bias. The tendency to remember our choices as better than they actually were, because we tend to over-attribute positive features to options we chose and negative features to options not chosen. Ostrich
Yeah.
effect. People tend to bury their head in the sand and avoid potentially negative but useful information just to avoid psychological discomfort.
Eating at a luxury restaurant, not looking at the bank account. Are you fucking stupid? Always look at your bank account. Always look at the things. When life is going to shit, you have to stare at that shit as it's hitting you in the face.
Selective perception bias. It's the tendency not to notice and more quickly forget stimuli that cause emotional discomfort and contradict our prior beliefs. Peak end rule. People seem to perceive not the sum of an experience, but the average of how it was at its peak and how it ended. I'll be making
Yeah.
similar videos. Subscribe to see them.
So we're gonna be checking out some of these others because they definitely very informative. Great video. Anyways, I want to leave the link in the description so you can go out and support the original person who worked on this. Thank you very much. And I'm just gonna say this now: like, comment, subscribe to them. If you decide to comment for me, do it because you have something to say. Subscribe because you think I'm someone who's worthy of your subscription, or because you want to come back around and support. And if you want to like, well, like it because you enjoyed it.